Sandra has been recognized internationally for her expertise on the connections between environmental contamination and cancer and reproductive health. Sandra earned her undergraduate degree in biology from Illinois Wesleyan University, studied for her master's in English at Illinois State University, and eventually completed her doctorate in biology at the University of Michigan. She's currently Distinguished Visiting Scholar at Ithaca College in upstate New York. If you've only heard about the kinds of subjects she writes about, you might think it's strange that one of her graduate degrees is in English, but as soon as you pick up one of her books, you can see that she brings a poet's ear for language and a novelist's gift of storytelling to her important scientific and social topics. Many of you, I suspect, are familiar with Sandra's 1997 book, Living Downstream, a scientist's personal investigation of cancer in the environment, which tells the story of her own experience with bladder cancer at the age of 20 and describes a cancer cluster in her hometown in Illinois that will remind many in this room of the cancer cluster in Fallon, Nevada during the past few years. And I know, having taught this work in several of my own classes at UNR, that quite a few of you have read Sandra's wonderful book, Having Faith, an ecologist's journey to motherhood, which was published in 2001. This is an extraordinarily clear and poetic argument about the effects of pollution on fetal and newborn health due to the phenomenon of biomagnification. Sandra is also the author of a book of poems, or a book of poetry, Post-Diagnosis, which was published in 1995. In addition to the obvious scientific, medical, and environmental aspects of her work, her writing and public speaking engage powerfully with social justice issues, such as why some people, because of where they live or where they work, are more exposed to environmental toxins than others. Sandra Steingraber was named in 1997 as a Ms. Magazine Woman of the Year, and in 2001 she received the Rachel Carson Leadership Award from Carson's alma mater, Chatham College. These are just a few of the many awards she has received for her important work. We're delighted to have Sandra with us this evening to present Toxic Trespass, talking about the body as a contaminated landscape. Please welcome her.
Well, thank you, Scott. And I'd like to thank all of my hosts here at in Reno for bringing me here, because I know whenever speakers are flown across state lines and crowds of people are assembled, a lot of work goes on behind the scenes to make that happen. So thank you very much. So for the last 15 years of my life, I have been writing about toxic trespass, which is essentially is what it says it is. It's the trespass of toxic chemicals from the outer environment that we all inhabit into our bodies, either through air, food, or water. And then once inside our bodies, the ability of those contaminants to turn on and turn off certain genes, affect our hormones, change our enzymes, get inside our brains and change the way our electrical circuitry is all hooked up in ways that raise the danger for certain kinds of health effects. So I made a little list of some of the topics I've written about, and I'll just read the list to give you a sort of flavor of what I write. I've written about pesticides that can cause miscarriages, mercury in fish that can cause learning disabilities, air pollution that alters lung development of infants. I've written about cleft palates, babies born with no skulls, breast cancer, the presence of dry cleaning fluid in breast milk, the presence of weed killers in drinking water, the presence of wood preservatives in the urine of school children, the presence of hormone-disrupting chemicals in house dust, falling sperm counts in U.S. farmers, early puberty in U.S. girls, testicular cancer in teenage boys, ovarian cancer in clams off the coast of northern Maine, where weed killers from blueberry bogs have drifted, leukemia among children, and leukemia among children whose mothers were exposed to pesticides while pregnant. Now, I do that out of two convictions. One is that the idea that we all have in our bodies chemical contaminants, which we have not consented to enter our bodies, but which have come to us in the air, food, and water that we drink, that this is really a human rights problem. And it's, I would argue, one of the biggest human rights problems of our time, just in the same way that slavery or child labor or the need for women to earn the right to vote, those were all human rights problems of another era. This is a problem of our time, and we need to stand up and deal with it. I also write about these issues out of a conviction that this is really a hopeful approach to problems like cancer and learning disabilities and dementing illnesses, because it's not fate or genes that are really at the source of the problem. It's instead chemicals that people are putting into the environment, and because people are putting them in there, people can take them out. So it's an irrational and meaningful place to begin a program of healthcare and health prevention. But I've learned along the way that my audiences typically do not find the kind of topics that I write about innately hopeful. In fact, quite to the contrary, that list of topics I just read is viewed by a lot of my readers as innately depressing. And I think it's because if we realize that something like a learning disability or asthma or autism is not just bad luck or a result of bad genes, it means that we're actually obligated to do something about it. We have a kind of responsibility, maybe not as an individual, but as a member of a society that, for example, generates electricity by shoveling coal into an oven and lighting it on fire. Coal is naturally contaminated with mercury, and when we burn coal, we send mercury out into the atmosphere. Sooner or later, it rains back down to Earth, is siphoned up the food chain, until by the time we eat a tuna fish sandwich, there's enough mercury in that tuna fish that if a pregnant woman eats it, it goes through the umbilical cord. It has the power to sabotage fetal brain growth development. That's our situation. So we don't have to be mystified anymore why we have a rising number of children in our schools that have special educational needs. We can find answers, but we may not like the answers we find because it means that we are all contributing, all of us who switch on light bulbs are contributing to the problem of mercury contamination of our atmosphere, and we have a responsibility to deal with that. And I think that's what people find depressing. Now, I make my living as an author. I'm not at the lab bench anymore. I used to be, generating my own science, but I don't do that anymore. So for the last 15 years, I kind of sing for my supper as a writer. So I need people to buy my books, right? And I need them to listen. So I can't afford for people to feel depressed and close the book. And so I have to figure out ways as a writer to seduce my readers through this and to convince them that this is, to not give in to despair and paralysis, because I actually want my readers to, when they finish the book, to go do something about it. And I also need them not to go into denial and turn away, because that would cause them to stop reading. So for me, knowledge is power, and that's the kind of fighting spirit that I'm hoping to invoke in some of my readers. So as far as I can see, my job is to deploy the best tools of creative writing to seduce my readers through some pretty intense material. Intense both because it's a lot of science, it's a lot of organic chemistry, and it's a lot of genetics and other things that people are sometimes afraid of. But also because the whole idea of kids born without the tops of their skulls is innately disturbing, and I need something to help my readers through that. So what I hope to do with you tonight, which is a great honor, is to tell you how I've tried to do this. And most of the evening, I'm going to spend just reading to you from samples of my various writings where I've tried out different tricks. And then hopefully, if my timing's right here, there'll be plenty of time during a Q&A and a discussion for you to tell me, how you think that works out. But first, I want to tell you how I came to have graduate degrees in both biology and poetry, and then I'm just going to spend the rest of my time really reading to you. My mom was a biologist before I was, and she was the first person off the farm to go to college.